Let's start first by asking, do you guys have any questions on objects and classes and assignment 7? Now, many of you have actually submitted that stuff. One thing, I messed up the test cases on contains, I think, in that I only test for true. So almost any expression that you do that always returns true, you could just make it return true, and it would pass my test. But that's not the right code. So I've tried to comment on your pull request to make sure that they're actually comparing the right stuff. Is it one of those things? Something on one of the assignments was wrong. I think it was contains or something like that. Something like that.
Are you talking about this past assignment or this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know what you. That was the one where you're seeing the two turtles were equal, I think.
Oh yeah. Turtles. Yeah. Equals for turtles. Sorry, not contains. Contains is assignment 6. Equals for turtles. I was only testing it with 2 that should have returned yes, and so you just make return true. It would pass my test, but it's still the wrong code. You need to compare that the x's and the y's are equal.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I tried to comment it on your pull request, but if I didn't, make sure that you did it the right way. Not so much for the grade, but for the learning. Any other questions or things about objects, classes, or the assignment? No? Going once, going twice? Cool. Let's start talking about arrays. No, you can't come in. As you start programming, you probably came up with stuff where you wish you could deal with a bunch of things at a time.
Your phone next to your microphone?
No. Okay, it stopped. Nothing exploded. We are good. For now. The simplest mechanism that Java and many programming languages give us is arrays. An array is just a bunch of things of the same type. It's a fixed type, fixed size collection of objects of the same type. We denote array types by putting open and close brackets after the data type. So that is an array of integers. This is a variable whose data type is an array of integers. And then the actual array is an object, so we initialize it with new, and we have to say how many integers is that going to contain. Does that make sense? We can also use this notation only when we are creating variables to initialize an array. It's not a generic type constructor for Java. It's only when we are doing that. There is 2 things that we can do with arrays for the most part. One is asking for the length. And that's a property. If you have an array, you can do array.length. And that gives you how many elements are in the array. The other one is access individual elements, like this. So, let's go see. Let me do Java REPL. Maybe. Okay. this works? No. Okay, never mind. We won't do it in Java REPL. Java REPL doesn't do arrays. And try to get JShell. Okay, never mind. I'll find JShell. Somewhere. Okay, bang 261. So now I can do, just created a variable A, which is an array of 3 integers, right? I can ask for length, and we get 3, right? Then I can access the first element of the array. And in computers, we start counting at 0. They lied to you when you were a kid. You shouldn't count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You should count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So A of 0 is 1. A of 1 would give us what? 2. A of 2 would give us 3. And A of 3 would give us something horrible.
Give us an error.
Sorry?
It'll give us an error.
It will give us an exception. Yeah, an error. Right? Hopefully nothing is about to break.
It just really doesn't want you standing there, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm assuming somebody is moving something upstairs or something like that. But. Does this idea make sense? Yes?
Yes.
You basically know arrays. There isn't that much more with arrays. Well, but now let's go start making cool stuff, right? Actually, I think we have been calling it this. And then we put everything in there, right? No. Just create a new one. Okay. Yeah, I'm using IntelliJ because my Eclipse got broken because I installed the Java 9 and it doesn't work with Java 9. And I haven't figured out how to unmess my Mac. On the other hand, this is how your computer should be, usually in a state of disarray because you just installed the latest version of something that doesn't have support, right? We create okay. Public static void main string. By the way, do you notice how do we declare main? What does this mean?
It's an array.
Ooh, we are getting an array, right? When you call a command from the command line, all the things that you put after the name of the command are what would go as the arguments, as strings.
Then what is the ARGS?
That's the name of the parameter.
Oh,
Whatever name you want. This is just a normal function. It just
Done.
takes an array of strings.
okay.
It's just that somebody started doing this and we all agreed that that's what we call it. Probably Kernighan or Ricci or one of those guys in C 30 years ago or so.
Does it stand for arguments?
Arguments, yes. But people got used to just putting args. It was simpler times. We were all afraid of carpal tunnel syndrome. No, we are still afraid. It was more, computers were slower, and so actually shorter variable names meant shorter compile times. But now we'll play with that in a second. So let me declare an array of ints, right? And then how can I print all the elements of that array? What can I use? Sorry? System.out, but that prints one element. How do I go through all the elements? A loop, right? What kind of loop?
A loop that we'll call each number.
Yeah, the obvious loop is a for loop, right? So this is kind of the standard thing. I start at 0. When do I stop? I keep going until what? While I'm less than the length, right? And what do I print? I tend to read this as ARR of I. A lot of people do ARR sub I. It's a horrible square bracket. There is no. Does this make sense? What happens if we run it? Thinking about it, maybe it will eventually compile and do stuff. Yay! We printed 1, 2, 3. Woohoo! Why is this cool? Because now that array can have whatever and my code will be the same. Does that idea make sense? The array could be bigger, could have different stuff, right? And my code is going to behave differently depending on my data. So Shift F10. Isn't this cool? So let me do this. Let me print it instead of print line it, and then add this, and then print a new line. And Why am I doing that? So we can do one more thing. There is a special for loop in Java just for arrays. It is called the for each loop. For, and instead of iterating over numbers, I'm gonna iterate over the elements. In this case, the elements on that array are also ints. So this is gonna be the name of my pseudo variable, lm, and then here I'll put the array name. And this will go through all the elements in the array, and inside I can use lm to refer to that element. So now I can do Does this make sense? Is this cool or what? What? Which one do you use? Which one looks cleaner to you guys? Which one looks prettier? The second one? Is anybody who likes the first one better?
I like it because it makes more sense.
Okay, you like it because you're more familiar with it, right?
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. There is another thing. Sometimes you need the actual index, right? And so if you're doing that, then you should iterate that way, right? So for example, right, we could start making public static, actually public, let's do not static, still static, int. We're gonna make a function that returns an array, right? How do we initialize it? We want an array of this many elements, right? So it's equal to a new what? Does that make sense? But now let's say that we want to initialize each element to its index, right? So our array is going to have 0, 1, 2, 3 as the elements, right? So we could have and then in the end, I return what? That array, right? ARR. Does this make sense? Can I do that one with a for each loop? Not without it being painful, right? I will still need to keep track of my index anyway. Right? So I could change this to Does that make sense? Um, so we have seen functions that return arrays, right? And that's perfectly okay. You just use new to create the array, do whatever you're going to do with it, and return it. We can have functions that take arrays, right? So let's do public static void print array. What do we do? This guy, right? Just go through every element in the array. And print it. Oops. If we don't care about how we print it like this. If we do care, then we may need to do other things because we are printing a space at the very end. That shouldn't be there. If these were commas, right, then our thing would look ugly. We have an extra comma at the end. But on the other hand, who cares? If we want to do it pretty, what do we do?
Do a space so you can't see it.
That works. We need to do a for loop and treat the last one differently. Right? Or something like that. It's not that hard, but and now we have seen how to pass arrays onto a function, right? Arrays are actually objects, just like the other objects that we have been playing with. And that means that we have they get passed how? By value or by reference? By reference, just like every other object, right? So I could have functions that modify the array that are passed and things like that. Does that make sense? So I could do stuff like public which for loop do we want to use to multiply every element by 2? Which one do we want to do? A for each or a normal for loop? Normal. Does this make sense? This actually modifies the array. Why do we return the same array just for convenience? So we could do things like this instead of these loops. I can do print array of double.
You get extra void in your,
Sorry?
in your assign array function. Or double all elements.
I have a what?
An extra void before the end.
Thank you. That's why it's not getting it. So instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, now we have 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12. Does this idea make sense? Any questions about arrays? No? They all make sense? What can be the elements of an array? What can the elements of an array be? What kinds of things? They can be ints. What else can they be?
Classes, strings.
Whatever the heck we want. Objects, right? Primitives.
We want to store along.
Anything we want to store, right? So we could do something like does that make sense? And then I can do stuff like this. Right? So I can put whatever I want in my array, including any kind of object, right? Now, we mentioned that arrays are objects, right? So what does that mean? That I can also create arrays of arrays. Does that make sense? There is nothing special. Yes.
What is in position 0?
Of what? In this, a new point of 1, 2. New point with x1 and y2.
Okay, but if you call like position 0, it's going to return 1 and 2, or it's going to return just 1?
Wait, points of 0?
Like
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Points of 0 is a point. So it's neither 1 nor 2. It's
Yeah,
a point.
points is an array, right?
Points is an array of points.
What is in position 0 of this array?
A
Just
point is a reference to that point. To a point. No. It's not a number. It's a point. It's not an int. It's not the number 1. It's a point. A Java repeater point.
So
it's
it's
an
going to
object.
return 1 and 2.
It's the point that contains a point with x equals 1 and y equals
The whole data structure.
2. It's the whole point. Not just the int.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's the-
You're going to print it, so
Sorry?
it's going to print it.
We did. It's here.
That's the position 0.
That's points of 0. Yes. Well, that's how it prints, right?
And the second one is the position 1.
Yes.
Oh, because you did next line, so I did it like that.
I did it on print line.
So if you want to do anything to like you said, with like position 0, you'd have to operate on each individual, like the x and the y.
Well, that depends on what do I want to do. If I had, in the assignment, we did functions that operate on points, right? Assignment 6, right? So if I call, right, depends on what do I want to do with that object. If it's an object, it's a point, I can translate it, right? I can do things to a point. Does that make sense? If that was a person, if I had a person class, right? Then what would be in there is a person with the first and the last name and an age and things like that. And so I can, depends on what they want to do too. to the thing. It's not two numbers, right? It's a point.
And can you break it?
What do you mean break it?
Like on PHP, we have a method that it's called like array explode. So you can break it, like you can get just one, or you can get just X, or you can get just Y. Like let's say that you have, for example, name equals Orlando. That's 0.0 of the array, and you want to separate it. You want to have just name, and you want to have just Orlando.
Not easily. Keep in mind that Java is typed, right? So it's not that easy. There are things that you can do with lambdas and things like that, but normally you do a for loop and create a new array, right? There is no magic because objects in Java are typed. In PHP and dynamic languages like PHP and Python and things like that, objects are not, or variables are not typed, and so your object doesn't really have a certain number of fields or anything like that. In this they do. So it is a lot harder to do those kinds of things. You need to complicate your life a lot more to get into that. Yes, they do, but the kind of default for now is to do for loops and get, if you wanted only the x's, right? And you could do that, right? So you could have something like this. Static. How many elements do we want? How many x's do we have? No, that depends on how many points we get past, right? So how many? If we get past 10 points, how many x's do we want? Sorry? Yes. If I get past 10 points, then I want 10 x's. If I get past 20 points, then I want 20 x's. So that's points.length, right?
So you're telling this new array that it's going to be, its length is going to be based on the other array?
Yep.
Okay.
And then for that would be one thing we could do, right? And so we could actually do this. And what would that print? 1 and 3, right? Does that make sense? So you can build whatever you need, right? We have been doing, basically, there is a kind of there's three kind of main patterns that we'll be using, right? One is do something with all the elements, print all the elements, right? Or do something to all the elements where we would actually call things. So this is do something to all the elements, right? This and this, well, this is do something to all the elements, right? This is do something to all the elements. We are changing them. Many times you don't, right? And another common thing that we do is to use some sort of accumulator to keep track of our work, right? Accumulate comes from what? What does accumulate mean? It's a fancy word for what? Fancy Latin word for what?
To gather and build it up.
Gather, add, right?
Yeah.
Sum. So the obvious one is I'm changing the name so you guys don't get too used to one particular name. Right? It's whatever you want. How can we add up all the elements in an array? I need an accumulator, I need something to keep track of the sum, right? So it's a variable, it's an int variable. What's a good name for it? That? No, doesn't. I don't think it works. Maybe. What do I start it as? 0, right? If I have an array of 0 elements, then the sum is 0.
Yes.
Actually, let me call it numbers. What do I do for each one of the elements of my array? What do I do? Add it to the sum. How do I do that? In the end, I return the sum. Does that make sense? Let me avoid this just to not print that much stuff. I'm gonna leave it down there, but hopefully it will still work after we are done. But, then I can do system out println. Oops. I need public static. Or actually, I need static, right? It doesn't need to be public. It does need to be static. So I have the numbers from 0 to 6. What do I expect to get out? On the other hand, that's what computers are for. Something like 19 or 20. 21. Yes. Does this make sense? Sometimes we have to do slight modifications of this, right? For example, get the minimum or the maximum amount on an array, right? How can I do it? This is accumulating, right? What's the smallest element of an array of 0 elements? Brain overload. There is no smallest element. We don't know how to do that yet. So let's assume that there's always at least one element, right? What's the easiest way? What can I start as my lowest element? The first element of the array, right? And then I can do for what do I do? I know that the smallest element I have seen is 25, right? I see 20. What do I do? Smallest is going to be equal to that, right? But only 1. So what happens if I do all the time? Would that help?
No, it should just give you whatever number.
Exactly. I need a conditional, right? So if what?
If number is greater than smaller.
The other way around, right? Less than smallest. I'm doing minimum rather than maximum. Does that make sense? And again, I need to be static. Oh, this one is not. What do we expect to get? 7, right? Yeah, there's nothing I can do to avoid it. Does that make sense? And since we have time, we're gonna do the coolest thing we can do with arrays. Well, actually, that's horrible. And it appears to be sound, right? Coming from some sort of speakers. Oh well. Let's try to sort an array. How can we do that? First of all, how do we do that in real life? How do we sort an array in real life? After you're done with this class, how do you sort an array? Google what the heck your standard library has and use it, right? Because there is no reason for you to implement something. Somebody spent a month optimizing that sorting to make it work most of the time, right? But usually we build our own sorts, or a bunch of them. What's the easiest way to sort? Actually, there is no easiest way to sort. In the next class, in the data structures class, you'll see a bunch of different sorting algorithms. We can probably do a couple here. These are not the best algorithms, but they are the simplest. Actually, to me, the simplest algorithm is called selection sort. It's basically find the lowest element in the array, right, and put it at the beginning. Then find the lowest of the rest of the array and put it at the beginning. Does that make sense? So we are going to do the index of the lowest element, right? But now I'm going to specify when do I start, right? Because after I do it and I do that swap, the lowest element is going to be on the first space. Does that make sense? Now I need to do should I start at 0? Well, I should start at from, right? That's the point. To not look at anything below from, right? Does that idea make sense?
Yes.
So if you call me with 3, then I'm not going to look at 0, 1, and 2, right? Yes? No? Maybe? Numbers of I is less than what? Because now I'm keeping the index, not the actual value, right? Then what would I do? Oops, that should be T. It's equal to what? Just I. I'm dealing with indices, right? Right? Does this make sense? That means that I should be able to call IDX mean of A2 static. What does that give me? What should that give me? That. Oh, from. What should this give me? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Yay, right? What if I pass it starting at 4? I'll still get 4. If I start at 5, what should I get? 5, right? Does this idea make sense? I'm going to create a function static. Everything is static. That will swap 2 elements on an array, right? I'm passing 2 indices of the array. What do I do? What's the obvious way to do it? Obvious and wrong way to do it.
You store them as separate values inside the method.
What would that do?
It would turn in1 into in2 and then do nothing the second time.
Exactly, right? So I need to store Does this make sense?
Yes.
Does this actually work? Maybe. Let's try to convince ourselves that it works by doing swap A2. I'm going to swap element number 0 with element number 5. Right? And then I can actually do print array and the first element should now be 9, right? I print it, I get 9, 20, and I get 10 instead of 9, right? This 5 is this guy. This guy, sorry. This guy. So I probably want to do a system.out.println line just to verify that I didn't mess up. Right? So it swaps, right? So now we can do sort. I am going to get the smallest element and put it there, right? So I'm going to call int smallest idx equals, or idx mean of arr I. That gives me the smallest one starting from I. Just so we can see it, print array probably something like, for now, some log, nothing breaks, and we got the right stuff. First of all, at the very bottom, it is sorted, right? So in the beginning, we find the smallest starting at 0, and we find that the smallest one is 4, which was that 7. Let me do this to print it first. So we print this array, right? When I 0, the smallest is 4, which is at 7, right? We swap it, now the 7 is at the beginning. And we are going to find the smallest, but now starting from element number 1. So we are not going to look at the 7, we're going to start from the 20, right? Found that the smallest, the index of the smallest is 5, which is at 9. We swap it, right? And we keep going. Isn't this cool?
Yeah, that's pretty useful.
It's incredibly simple. You can sort arrays, right? How long does this take to run? Order of operations, order of n, right? How long does this take to run?
That's weird.
Less time than it takes me to deal with pen and paper.
How many times, how long does it take me to find the minimum of an array? And I need to go through every element in the array, right? How many times do I do that? N times, right? It's actually not quite true because I'm dealing with smaller and smaller arrays, right? So this is the summation from 1 to n, which is n squared over 2, sort of kind of. So it is still order of n squared, right? If my array grows big, this will grow about the square of the array. So if my array is 1,000, it takes me about 1,000,000 ticks to do this. If my array is the size of 1,000,000, then it's going to take me about a trillion in English, 1,000,000,000,000 ticks, right? Does that make sense? In this particular case, it doesn't matter how my array is. I'm going to do the same stuff, right? Is this cool or what? This is, I think, selection sort. There is a couple of other famous sorting algorithms. To me, this one is the easiest one, right? Because I'm going to make you find the min and the max and things like that about 700 times in this class. You'll do it for arrays, you'll do it for arrays of points, you'll do it for everything, right? There is another way that is not very useful, but it's very pretty. And it usually in practice actually is about the worst you can do. But it is pretty, and it could save you some steps. The problem is that the steps are bigger. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go through every element in the array, right? And if the element is out of order with the next one, we are going to swap. Does that make sense? That is called bubble sort. What it does is that you keep moving stuff, but eventually the largest element in the array is going to end up at the very end of the array. Does that make sense? And so, bless you. Actually, let me just do it like this first. So we are sorting so that the lowest one is first, right? So if ARR of I is greater than ARI of I plus 1, I need to swap them, right? also, if I did this, I need to record the fact that I made a swap. I'm gonna do bubble. I'm not gonna do this. Now I'm gonna pray that I can call static. Can you make this static? Of course not. Maybe it would even work. Missing return statement. Woohoo! This one should not be Boolean, should be void. Oops. That wasn't very useful. What? Sorry? Yeah, I don't. Let's see. Let's print what are we returning. False. Oh. I get here, right? That should. Oh, because I'm passing. No, I'm passing. Oh yeah, I'm passing ARR, which is already sorted. F is good. My code was right. I was just sorting something that was already sorting. So one advantage is that bubble sort will actually stop. Yeah. So we start with that array, then we start debubbling it. If we were printing at every step, you'll see that this 30 keeps going until it gets there, right? So now we have 30 at the end, 20. One thing is that this, if you see, starts becoming more sorted, even though it's not kind of the main point. And at the end, we did less steps. We only had to go through it 5 times. Does that make sense? Now, ideally, we should be passing we don't really need to keep going. So this should be, instead of arr.length, this should be 2 minus 1. And then here, and And I can actually decrement last. That should still work. And it's slightly more efficient because I'm not looking at these numbers anymore at the very end. So I'm not looking at these guys. Does that make sense? Again, how long does it take me? About order of n squared. The possible advantage is that I shave a few at the end. The problem is that I do a lot more swaps than I need to. So depending on how big are your numbers versus your for loops, you may gain some efficiency or not. I find bubble sort actually slightly more confusing than selection sort. But now you have seen sorts, you have seen nested loops, though we didn't call them nested loops, right? The functions that we're calling are a loop and we call them inside a loop, right? But I almost never write nested loops because functions are a lot nicer than nested loops to me. Any questions? Any answers? No. Then I think I'll return 5 minutes of your life to you guys or so. And we'll do some more examples and things like that on Wednesday and then have some time for working on the assignment.